Hey guys, welcome to this interesting session on Salesforce Apex tutorial for beginners. Now, Apex is a strongly typed object-oriented programming language whose syntax is almost the same as that of Java. So if you can program in Java, there are high chances you can become an Apex developer too. So in today's session, I'll be talking about Apex from the basic. So anyone with a bit of programming language can understand how to start programming in Apex. But before we get started, I would like to address the agenda for today's session. So we'll start our session by understanding what exactly is Apex and some of its prominent features. Next, we will understand when to choose Apex or what can we program using Apex, and also see what is Apex developer environment. Moving on, we will understand what are classes in Apex and how can we create Apex classes, and then see what are the various data types and variables in Apex. Then for the demo part, we will write a simple Apex program. And after that, we'll take a look at some of the keywords in Apex and then the conditional statements, loops in the Apex programming language. Finally, we will conclude the session by talking about Apex triggers. So these were all the topics we're going to cover in today's session. And guys, if you like our video, do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update from the Edureka channel. Also, if you're looking for an online training certification in Salesforce, check out the link given in the description box below. Now moving on to our first topic, what is Apex in Salesforce? Well, Apex is a strongly typed object-oriented programming language that allows developers to execute flow and transactional control statements on the Salesforce servers. Along with this, they can also make calls to different APIs. Now, Apex syntax looks 70% the same as that of Java. Apex enables developers to add business logic to most system events, which includes button clicks, record updates, and creating Visualforce pages. Now, as I've mentioned, Apex is a strongly typed. It means Apex validates or checks the reference to the object at the compile time. It is also object-oriented programming language, which means it supports classes, inheritance, and interfaces, and so on. And all the Apex code is saved, compiled, and executed on the Salesforce server itself. So now let us move on to our next topic, which is features of Salesforce Apex to understand Apex better. So the first feature is Apex can be integrated with DML calls and APIs, which means Apex can be used to perform DML operation like insert, update, upsert, delete on Salesforce object records. Now, Salesforce objects are like accounts, your contacts, your leads, opportunities. All these are known as Salesforce object, and you also call them S objects. You can perform queries on these S object records using SOQL, which stands for Salesforce Object Query Language, and SOSL, which stands for Salesforce Object Search Language in Apex. It also supports custom public API calls that can be built from stored Apex methods. The next feature of Apex is it is easy to use. Now, Apex is based on the familiar Java idiom, such as variables and expression syntax, blocks and conditional statement syntax, loop syntax, object and array notation, and so on. Apex syntax and semantics are easy to understand, and it encourages the efficient use of Lightning Platform. Therefore, Apex code are both briefly and clearly understood and also easy to write. Also, Salesforce Apex is very easy to test. It provides built-in support for unit test creation and execution. It includes test result to indicate how much of the code is covered and which part of your code could be more efficient. Now moving on to the third feature of Salesforce Apex, which is it is data focused. Now when I say Apex is data focused, it means most of the operations are based on the data in the database and is designed to execute multiple queries and DML statements together on the database. And database is basically where all the data is stored. So developers can use the database stored procedures to combine multiple transaction statements on a database server. The next feature of Salesforce Apex is it is multi-tenant aware. So for people who are new to Salesforce, you should know that Salesforce runs in a multi-tenant environment, which means it has a common database which multiple users use. They store all the data and records in the shared database itself. So the Apex runtime engine is designed to guard closely against runaway code, which prevents from monopolizing shared resources, which means it does not allow any single user to use more of the database than the other user. So any code that violates this limit false, there will be an easy to understand error message displayed. So in this way, all the users will get equal access to the database. So these were some of the features of Salesforce Apex. Now let us move on to our next topic and understand when to code using Apex. Firstly, we can use Apex to create web services that integrate Salesforce with other applications. You can integrate Salesforce with various third-party applications using APIs. Second, you can use Apex to create email services for email setup. Just to give an example for this, you can create an Apex trigger that will send a mail to your email ID whenever a new lead or a new contact is added to the Salesforce database. So Apex can be used to create email services. The third point is you can use Apex to implement functionalities that can't be implemented using existing workflow flows and process builder functionalities. Now, workflow rules and process builder operations sometimes have feature limitation that can be overcome with Apex. For example, pulling information from an external system can be done through Apex and not by workflow logic and process builders. Also, when dealing with certain or large set of data, Apex can be more efficient than the other options. The fourth scenario when we can use Apex is it can be used to perform complex validation over multiple objects. You can create custom transaction logic, that is the logic that occurs over the entire transaction and not just a single record or object. For example, using the database methods for updating the records and so on. So these are some of the scenarios you can use Apex to get your work done. Now let us move on to our next topic and see the Apex development environment. So in this topic, let us first understand the working structure of Apex. As shown in the diagram below, Apex runs entirely on the Force.com platform. So in this diagram, you can see there are two users. One is the developer user and the other one is the end user, who perform two different sequences of action. First is when the developer saves the code, and the second is when an end user performs some action which invokes the Apex code as shown here. So let us talk about this action one by one. So first is the developer user. So when a developer writes and saves Apex code to the platform application server first compiles the code into a set of instructions that can be understood by the Apex runtime interpreter, and then saves all those instructions as metadata in the data storage. Now all the uncompiled Apex classes and triggers are compiled and stored in the data storage. So this was the developer user actions. Next, coming to the end user action. So when an end user requests or triggers the execution of Apex by either clicking on a button or accessing a Visualforce page, the platform application server retrieves the compile instruction from the metadata, which is your data storage, and sends them through the runtime interpreter or Apex runtime to the end user. All this happens with the help of the internet and in a fraction of a second, so the end user observes no difference in the execution time. So this was the working structure of Salesforce Apex. Now you can develop the Apex code in either Sandbox or Developer Edition of Salesforce. You can write Apex code using various tools. So let us talk about some of the tools we can write Apex code on. So the first one is Force.com Developer Console. Now the Developer Console is an integrated developer environment and collection of tools that we can use to create, debug, and test application in our Salesforce org. Next, we have the Force.com IDE. Now this is a plugin for Eclipse IDE which provides a unified interface for building and deploying Force.com application. It is especially designed for developers and the development team. And next we have the code editor in the Salesforce user interface. The code editor in the Salesforce user interface is where all classes and triggers are compiled when they're saved. And any syntax errors are flagged here. Also, you cannot save your code until it is compiled without any errors. The Salesforce user interface also numbers the lines in the code and uses color coding to distinguish between different elements such as comments, keywords, strings, and so on. So now I will show you how you can go to the developer console in Salesforce. So to go to the developer console, type developer.salesforce.com. So here you can see you have two options. One is login and the other one is sign in. Now as most of you would be a new user, you can just click on sign in over here. Just fill in these few details. First name and your last name, your work email ID, your job role, your company's name, the country you're in, your postal code, and you can choose a username for your account. After this, just click on this condition and click on sign me up. After this, you'll be sent a mail to an email ID where you'll have the link for the developer account and also a username. So after you click on the link, it will ask you to set a password for your account. After you set the password, you'll be redirected back to this page. Now, as I already have an account, I'll just log in. I'll select my account. Now click on allow over here. Now see, I'm redirected back to the same page. So all I have to do is go to my name over here, click on the drop down button and go to my developer account. Select my account. Now for people who are new to Salesforce, this is what the Salesforce console would look like. So to go to your developer console, what you need to do is click on the setting button over here and you have an option here called the developer console. So we'll just click on this. So here is the developer code. We can write our Apex code over here. So first you need to either create a class or a trigger and then start with the code. You can code right here using the source code editor. So when you save a trigger or a class, the code is automatically compiled. Also, when there is any compilation errors, it will be reported to you. The source code editor uses a color scheme for easier readability of code element and provides auto-completion for classes and methods name. I will show you how to execute an Apex code in the demo part. So in this topic, I've taught you how to create your Salesforce Developer Edition account and then how to come to the developer console. So let us move on to the next topic and see what are classes in Apex and how to create them. Firstly, an Apex class is a blueprint or a template from which objects are created. Now, an object is an instance of a class. A class can contain variables and methods. Now, variables are used to specify the state of an object, such as an object's name or type. Since these variables are associated with a class and are members of it, they're commonly referred to as member variables. So now let us see what is the syntax for the Apex class. In Apex, you can define an outer class, also called as top level class, and you can define classes within the outer class called as inner classes. Next, it is mandatory to use access modifier like global or public in the declaration of the outer class. Then an Apex class is defined using the class keyword followed by the class name. You can name your class anything you want. Next, it is not necessary to use access modifier in the declaration of the inner classes. So this was the syntax for the Apex class. So now let us see how can you create a class in Salesforce. So there are three ways of creating an Apex class in Salesforce. The first one is through Developer Console, the second one is through Force.com IDE, and the third one is through Apex class detail page. So let us talk about it one by one. The first is creating the class from the Developer Console. So for this, we need to sign in to a Salesforce console, then go to Setup, Developer Console, New, Apex class, and then name a class. Let me just switch to the Salesforce console to show you how you can do it. So I'm back to my Salesforce console. So after logging in, after going to a developer account, after setup, going to a developer console, you'll be landed to this page. Now here you can just go to File, New, and you have an option here called as Apex class. So when we click on the Apex class, it will ask us to name our Apex class. You can name it anything you want and click on OK. And after that, your Apex class will be created. So let me just create it to show you how. So let me just name it as class 1 and click on OK. You see, we have the outer class access modifier followed by the class keyword and then a class name. You can now write a code over here. So this is one way to create a classes in Apex. Now let us see what are the other ways of creating a class in Apex. The second way of creating classes in Salesforce Apex is through Force.com IDE. So for this, the first step is to open your Force.com Eclipse IDE. Then you can create a new project by clicking on File, go to New, and then select Apex class. Then you can provide the name for the class and click on OK. The diagram here shows us how you can create an Apex class from the Force.com IDE. Now moving on to the third way of creating a Salesforce Apex class. It is from the Apex class detail page. For this, you need to go to Setup, then search for Apex class and click on the link. It will then open the Apex class detail page. So let me just show you how you can do that. So when you log into a Salesforce developer console, this tab will also be opened. You can just see over here. Here is my developer console and the tab from which I got to my developer console. So here you can just go to Setup, click on Setup. Just search for classes. Here you have an option called as Apex classes. So just click on this. Here you can just click on New and you can start coding. So this was the third way of creating a class in Salesforce Apex. So now I guess you have some idea about how to create a class in Apex. So let us move on to our next topic and see what are the data types and variables in Apex. Now as we know, Apex language is a strongly typed language. So every variable in Apex will be declared with a specific data type. Now variables are in-memory containers that can hold data belonging to a specific data type during processing and can be reused based on their scope. All Apex variables by default are initialized to null initially. Now Apex supports the following data types. The first one is the primitive data type, which includes integer, long, decimal, date, datetime, string, ID, or boolean. Next we have S-object, which represents any record in a Salesforce database. And after that we have enums. Now enum is an abstract data type that stores one value of a finite set of specified identifiers. So let us talk about them one by one. So first we'll start with primitive data types. So first in primitive data type is the integer data type. Now this integer data type is a 32-bit numbers that does not include any decimal point. The value ranges from the start from -2,147,483,468 and the maximum value is up to 2,147,483,647. So now let me just switch to my Salesforce console and show you how you can declare an integer data type and variable. So just to show you how you can declare an integer data type and variable, we'll first go to debug and open execute anomalous window. Now execute anomalous window is a place where you can write the logic of a program and run it without having to save it. So we'll just go to open. So here you can just write integer, which is the data type, and we're going to use a variable, let's say I, and we'll initialize I to 100. Now this 100 will be stored in the I variable. Now let us print the I value. For that, I'm using system.debug I. Now system.debug is like an output statement. Like we have system.out.println in Java or cout in C++. Like that in Apex, we use system.debug. So after this, we'll just click on execute. Now if you don't see this window, what you have to do is just click on open logs. Make sure this is always checked and then click on execute. Now you can see there are different timestamps, events, details. In order to get our output, you need to search for debug. See, you'll have an option here called user debugs, and that is where our output will be seen. Also, you can just click on debug only option over here and you can see 100. So this was about the integer data type in Apex. Now let us move on to the next data type. Our next data type is long. Now this is a 64-bit number without a decimal point. This is used when we need a range of values wider than those provided by integer. The syntax will almost be the same. All you have to do is replace integer I is equal to 100 by long L and the value. Next we have decimal data type. Now a number that includes a decimal point are declared with a decimal data type. By default, all the currency fields are automatically assigned to the type decimal. Also, if you want to add more numbers after the decimal point, you can use double data type. Next we have the date data type. Now this variable data type indicates a date, but it can only store the date and not the time. Now if you want both the date and the time, we can use the datetime data type, which is a value that indicates a particular day and time. Here is the example for date data type. Date today is equal to date.today function, and it will display the date in this format. First will be the year, then will be the month, and then will be the date. After this, we have a unique data type which is known as blob. Now blob is basically a collection of binary data stored as a single object. And here is an example of a blob. After this, our next data type is the string data type. Now string is any set of characters or alphabet within a single quote, and it does not have any limit for the number of characters. You can define a string data type with a keyword string followed by the variable, and you can write any number of characters over here. In the example, I've written ABCDE. Followed by the string data type, we have the ID data type. Now ID is used to store the ID of a record. Now as we know, all records will have a unique ID. So in order to perform any operation on that record, we need to use the ID of that. So ID in Apex is any valid 18-character Lightning Platform record identifier. If you set an ID to a 15-character value, Apex automatically converts the value to its 18-character representation. Here you can see the example of an ID, which is 003 followed by a number of zeros, 3T2PGAAD. It is basically an 18-character Lightning Platform record identifier. After this, we have the Boolean data type. The Boolean data type is a value that can only be assigned true, false, or null. It is basically used to check for a condition, if it is either true or false or null. So these were some of the primitive data types in Apex. Next, we have the S-object data type. The S-object is a special data type in Salesforce. Now, as you know, Apex is tightly integrated with the database. So S-object represents and record into the Salesforce database. So with this data type, you can create or modify or delete any records in the database. So for example, let me just execute a set of code so you can see how does S-object data type work. So for this, let me just switch back to my Salesforce console. Now here, I'll just go to open execute anomalous window. So I'm going to create a new account using the S-object data type. So first, let me just show you what all accounts name do I have. I'll just go to accounts. So these are the accounts I have. So let me just create an account called latest account. So for that, I'll go back here, account, which is my S object. I'll just create an instance for that account. Let's say ABC. is equal to new account, and then I'm going to name my account. Let me just name it latest account, semicolon, and I'm going to insert ABC to the database and just click on execute. Now you can see our latest account should be created. Let me just go back here and refresh this. Here you see our latest account is created. So this is how S-object data type can be used. After the S-object data type, we have the enum data type. Now enum is an abstract data type that stores one value of a finite set of specified identifier. You need to use the keyword enum to define an enum data type. Here is an example for an enum data type. Public, enum, season, and we have a list of the identifier: winter, spring, summer, and fall. After this, we also have collection, which includes list, sets, and maps. So this was about Apex data type and variable. Now I guess you have some idea about classes and data types in Apex. So let us move on to the next topic and write an Apex program. So in today's demo, we're going to write a simple hello world program. So for that, I've switched back to my Salesforce console. So my first step is to create an Apex class. So for that, I'll go to Files, New, Apex class. So I'll just name my Apex class as Apex class itself. So click on OK, and a class is created. So you can see our class starts with a public access specifier followed by the keyword class and a class name. Next, we will write a method which will contain the hello world code. So for that, we'll specify public static void. Our method name, we'll just call it Apex method. Yeah. And now inside this, we're going to output hello world statement. So what is the output statement in Apex? It is system.debug. So I'll just write system.debug. Now you see Apex is suggesting me to choose any of these following options. And you can see there is different colors in which public is written, void is written, and the method name is written. This is what I was talking about. So I'm going to type in hello world over here. Now I'll put a semicolon. Now this is the code for the hello world program. Now we'll have to save this. So just go to save. Also in Apex, we do not have to manually compile the code. As soon as we save the program is automatically compiled. So there is no error in our code. If there is an error, it would be displayed over here. See, under problems, it will be displayed. Let me just show you. So if I remove void from here and save it, you see we have a problem over here. Now you can see our error over here. Static is not allowed on constructors. Invalid constructor name Apex method. So when I remove void, I will have to return some value if I don't use void. So that is why the error is over here. So I'll just type void again. Save this. Now in order to view our output, what we need to do, go to debug, open execute anomalous window. Now here all you have to do is enter your class name and your method name. So class name is Apex class dot a method, semicolon. Always make sure that the open log is ticked and click on execute. Now you see the log appears over here. Now if you uncheck the open log button over there, this log will not automatically open. So for our output, you can just scroll down to use the debug, or you can just click on debug only over here. So here is our output, hello world. Now this was just a simple example. We are going to see many more examples program in this tutorial. So now let us move on to the next topic, which is keywords in Apex. First is the final keyword. You can use the final keyword to modify a variable and give it a constant value. To define a constant, mark a variable as both static and as final, which means you need to use both the keywords static and final. Also, you should remember that the final variable can only be assigned a value once, either when you declare a variable or inside a constructor. You must assign a value to it in one of these two places only. Now here is an example for the final keyword. Here you see we have used both the keywords static and final, and we use the integer data type, and int constant is the variable, and we have initialized the value to 10. Now this int constant variable value will be 10 throughout the program. If you try to override the value for this int constant variable, then you will get an exception, system final exception. Final variable has already been initialized. Then you will get an exception, system final exception, final variable has already been initialized. So this was about the final keyword in Apex. The next keyword is return keyword. A return keyword is a keyword used to return a value from a method. Now looking at an example of the return keyword, it starts with the keyword return and then is the variable whose values we want it to be returned. After the return keyword, we have with sharing keyword. Now if a class is defined with this keyword, then all the sharing rules of the class applies to the current user. Explicitly setting this keyword ensures that the Apex code runs in the current user context. Now this is the syntax for the sharing keyword. First is the access specifier, which is public in this case, then is the with sharing keyword followed by the class keyword and the class name. After this, the next keyword is without sharing. Now without sharing keyword is opposite to the with sharing keyword. The without sharing keyword is used when declaring a class to ensure that the sharing rules for the current users are not enforced on that class. You can use this when you can explicitly turn off sharing rules enforcement when a class is called from another class which is declared using with sharing keyword. Now coming to the syntax of without sharing, it is almost the same as with sharing keyword, but instead of with sharing, we have the without sharing keyword over here. So these four were few of the keywords in Salesforce Apex. Now let us move on to the next topic and understand the conditional statements and the looping statements in Apex. Decision-making structures requires the developer to specify one or more condition to be evaluated or tested by the program, and along with this condition, there should also be statements or set of statements to be executed if the condition is determined to be true, and optionally other statements to be executed if the condition is determined to be false. So now let us take a look at the conditional statements in Apex. First, we have the if condition. So in this, it checks for only one condition. If it is true, then it executes the body of the code. Else, if it is false, it does not execute the statement in the parenthesis, but the next statement after it. Now take a look at the syntax for an if condition. It starts off with the if keyword followed by the condition. After this, if the condition is true, the set of statements inside the parenthesis is executed. Else, it just comes out of the parenthesis, and after the parenthesis, the next statement is executed. So let me just switch back to my developer console to show you the working of if statement. So for this demo, let me just go to Open Execute Anomalous window, remove this. So I'm going to use an if condition to check which of the two numbers are greater. For that, I'll assign two variables with some numbers. I will assign integer a to 100. Next, we'll assign integer b to 200. Now after this, I'll check for the if condition. If a is greater than b, then if it is true, it will output a is greater, and if the condition is false, it will output that b is greater. So now the open log is ticked. I'll just execute this. Now I'll click on debug only, and you can see b is greater. Now let me just change the value of a and make a greater and see what will be the output. So I'll just change this to 300 and click on execute. Debug only, and you see a is greater. It shows the timestamp when the program is executed. So this was the if conditional statement in Apex. So now let us move on to our next conditional statement, which is if else statement in Apex. Now an if statement can be followed by an optional else statement, which executes when the condition is false. Now if the condition is true, then the if block of code will be executed. Otherwise, the else block of code will be executed. Now let us take a look at the syntax for the if else statement. So it starts off with the if keyword followed by the condition, and if the condition is true, the first set of statements are executed. But if the condition is false, the second set of statements are executed. Now let us see an example for the if else statement in a Salesforce console. So let me just switch to my Salesforce console. I'll go to Open Execute Anomalous window. Now I'll just make the changes in this code itself. So I will add in another variable over here, integer c, which is equal to 400. We'll assign the value of c to 400. Now we'll check for a condition over here. If a is greater than b and also a is greater than c, then we'll output a is greater. Else, if it is not true, we will output b or c is greater. Now here we're checking for a condition if a is greater than b and if a is greater than c also. If that is true, we'll get the output saying a is greater. Else we'll get the output saying b or c is greater. So this is checked. We'll click on execute. Now I use the debug. Click on debug only. Now you see b or c is greater. So this was the if else conditional statement in Apex. So now let us see the next conditional statement, which is nested if. You can use nested if there are more than 3 conditions to test and more than 4 set of statements to execute. This is the syntax for nested if statement. So it checks for the first condition, and if the condition is true, the first set of statements are executed. Next it checks for the second condition and so on. So these were some of the condition statements in Apex. Now let us see what are looping statements in Apex. So the first looping statement in Apex is the while loop. The Apex while loop repeatedly executes a block of code as long as a particular Boolean condition remains true. And after the condition becomes false, the control comes out of the loop and the other statements are executed after that. So this is the syntax for a while condition. The syntax starts with a while keyword, then it checks for the condition, and if it is true, the set of code is executed. So let me switch to the Salesforce console to show the working of the while loop. So go to debug, open execute anomalous window. So I'm just going to display first 10 numbers. So for that, I'll just initialize the count integer variable to 1. Next, I'll just add the while loop. While count is less than 10. System.debug count. And then increment the count value to count plus plus. So here in the first statement, I've initialized the count integer variable to 1. Then I'm checking for a condition. So in the first time, it'll check if 1 is less than 10. It is. So it'll display 1 over here. So as count is initialized to 1, it'll check if 1 is less than 10. As it is true, it'll display the count value over here, which is 1. Next, it'll again check if 2 is less than 10. So let me just make it 11 over here. So now when the value of the count is 11, it'll check and the condition will be false. So it'll just come out of the loop. So I'll just execute this and I'll go to debug only. Now you can see all the 10 values are displayed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this was the working of the while loop. So now let us move on to the do while loop. The Apex do while loop repeatedly executes a block of code as long as a particular condition remains true. But unlike the for loop and the while loop, which tests the condition at the top of the loop, the do while checks the condition at the bottom of the loop. Another major difference is that the set of code is at least executed once in the do while loop. Now this is the syntax for the do while loop. First is the do keyword, then is the code to be executed, followed by the while condition. So let me just switch back to my Salesforce console to show the working of do while loop. So let the integer count be 1 itself. I'm going to type do over here, then execute the set of code. Now here we are going to print and increment inside the code and then check for the while condition. Now I'll execute this. Now I'll see the same set of values will appear. So let me just make it 12 in order to show the difference. I'll just make this 12. So I'll just make it 13. So the first 12 number will be visible. So I'll execute this and go to debug only. And you can see the first 12 digits are displayed. So this was the working of the do while loop statement. So now let us move on to the third loop, which is the for loop statement in Apex. A for loop is a repetitive control statement that allows you to effectively write a loop that needs to be executed a specific number of times. There are different ways of writing a for loop in Apex, but here is the syntax for the list or set iteration. So the syntax starts with the for keyword, followed by the variable and the list or set you want to iterate. Then it has the body of the code. Now let me just switch back to my Salesforce console to show you the working of for loop. So here I'm going to make a list of integer values is equal to new integer list. We're going to make a list of integers. So here you should also specify the value of the list. So let it just be 1 to 10. So let it be a list of numbers from 1 to 10. After this, we'll add the for condition. For integer I in the list system.debug I. So we'll just execute this now. So I guess I've misspelled system over here. So I'll just make the change system and I'll execute this. Now you can see. So this is how you can use a for loop to iterate a particular condition. So these were the conditional statement and the looping statement in Salesforce Apex. So now let us move on to the next topic and see what is Apex triggers. Apex triggers are a piece of code which enables you to perform custom actions before or after changes to any Salesforce record. These changes could be anything like insertion of records, updating of records, or deletion of records. You can use triggers to perform operations based on a specific condition, so only when the condition occurs, the triggers are executed. Now, triggers could be used to modify related records or restrict any certain operation from happening, like restricting addition of a field or deletion of a field. Now, you can use triggers to do anything that you used to do in Apex, including executing SOQL and DML, or also calling custom Apex methods. So I guess you have some idea about Apex triggers. Now let us see what is the syntax for Apex triggers. A trigger definition starts with the trigger keyword. It is then followed by the name of the trigger. Next is the Salesforce object that a trigger is associated with. This could be anything like leads, contacts, accounts, or any custom object, which is also called as S object. Next is the trigger event. You can fire a trigger in one or more events also, but it should be comma separated. Next is the body of the code, which contains the conditions under which the trigger is fired. So in this demo, we are going to create a trigger so that when someone creates an account, the trigger will check if the account name already exists. If it does, it will throw an error message saying the account name already exists. So for this, let us go to our Salesforce account, developer.salesforce.com. So if you're going to the website for the first time, here you'll have two options, login and sign in. If you're a new user, you can just create an account. It will just take maybe 1 or 2 minutes to create an account. After you have logged in, you can just go to your name over here and go to my developer account. Select your username. So if you're new to Salesforce, this is what a Salesforce console would look like. Now to go to the developer console, just click on the setting over here and select developer console. Now go to file, new, Apex trigger. We can name our trigger anything we want. We'll just name it account duplication. And on what Salesforce object we're going to do this? It's on account. And we'll click on submit. So here we have the trigger keyword, the name of a trigger, and on account object. And here we have the trigger event. Next, for a body of our code, we're going to create a for loop first. For account object, we're going to create an instance for account, trigger.new. Next, list account. Next, creating another instance, list account myNew is equal to. Now here we need to select an ID which will compare the new account name with the existing account name. So for that, let's go to select ID, comma, name from account where name is equal to account name. This statement will get us the account name. Now in order to compare and throw an error message, we need to check for a condition. So for that, if myNew.size. Here we are using the size context variable, which will return the total number of records in a trigger invocation. So if it is greater than 0, it will throw us an error message. Account.name.add error. Account with same name already existing. We're just going to save this. So it's saved. Now let us go to our account section. Now here you can see I have 5 account records and these are my account names. So now let me try creating a new account with the same name. So I'll click on new and the account name I'll give it as test account. So now none of the other fields are mandatory, so I'll just click on save. So here you can see we are getting an error message saying account with the same name already existing. And you can see how simple it is to create a trigger in Salesforce. And with this, we have come to the end of the session. I hope it was helpful. Do leave your valuable comments in the comment section below. Happy learning.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!